it's celebrated more as a day off, and
Oh, really?
yeah, and before you know it, it's over. So it's
Sales.
they don't have sales. No, that they don't have, because the stores are closed. But they do have people going to the beach, and they do have people going on hikes. Everything's closed. Every store is closed. All businesses are closed. All the banks are closed for Shavuot, which is interesting because, again, it's a holiday that most people in the Jewish community aren't even aware of, I would say. So that is kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean, Shavuot is one more. Sorry. Shavuot is also, because it's one day, it's over before you know it. And in Israel, it's only one day. And in the diaspora, it's sometimes celebrated, obviously, for 2 days. But when you look at the way, again, the fact that most people don't even celebrate it here or know about it, I think you can say that Passover and Sukkot are unique holidays to be there for in Israel. So today we're going to jump into Solomon building some more, which I thought maybe we'd get to last week. But last week we really, again, we talked about, we were in chapter 8, which was the dedication. You can see it was a very long chapter. It was 66 verses. So it's a very long chapter, at least the way it's kept together, as one speech, which it is. So, and it's what, at least in Jewish tradition, Solomon is most appreciated for, which was the building of the temple. During his lifetime, look, he also was known for the fact that he built lots of other things. And hey, Michael, were you just checking to make sure it was all working?
Yeah, I did set something, but you got it working.
You didn't, but I figured it out.
Oh.
The sound, yeah, the mic wasn't on for here.
Oh.
So I said it. I figured it out. Thank you, though. Thanks for coming by. I figured something out. Yeah. So it was a weird one. But anyways, so Solomon was probably known more in his time for building some of these other things too, including, what we're going to read today. But what also I think he was really known for in reality was becoming the king after his father, right? Because David took the throne from Saul, and Solomon is the first in the dynastic. Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was king for a short period of time over some part of Israel, but definitely did not create a dynasty. Solomon establishes a dynasty. So if anything, Solomon is really should be appreciated, not so much for what he built, but for what he did and for who he was, which was David's son and the one who continues on.
Was he, I don't remember, a king of both North.
Yeah, he was. So he was, and it's interesting because he doesn't actually finish his kingship as king over both. So the interesting thing about this is that there is no king of Israel, of a united Israel, who is king over his entire lifetime of both north and southern kingdoms. So Saul isn't, because David essentially takes the power away from him in the south. David took power, but it means that when he started, he wasn't king over the north. And Solomon starts as the king of both the north and south, but by the end of his life, the north comes away. So there really is no king of Israel who ever starts his reign and ends his reign as the king over everything. So that's how it really wasn't ever a unified kingdom, because it never lasted long enough for one king to reign entirely over that.
Do we know of the other leaders that were leaders of the South, when the different leaders?
The other leaders besides David?
No, when it was separated.
Oh, yeah. So all of Solomon's descendants and David's descendants we know about, and we're going to read about in the book of Kings. So all the kings of Judah we'll read about, and all the kings of Israel we will read about. We'll read more about some of them than others, because some of them were,
Kings of
were-
the north, right?
yeah, and the kings of the south, you could make the argument we're just kings of the south. The difference is,
We do know the king.
yeah, but we knew, and we know the kings that we know both lines of kings. So
Okay.
if we look at a chronology, but some of the kings of the north are kings for very, very short periods of time because they're assassinated or they die in battle. And some of the kings of the south are not kings for that long too. But we'll get into that once we're done with Solomon. We'll get into through this. But Solomon is king for a long time. But again, he doesn't finish up as king. And one of the last things we read is that the Lord had shown his servant David and his people, which again is David is Solomon's father, but you can still see that the house of David and David is being invoked as the important person in this house. And we do know that the earliest artifacts that we found that talk about the kingdom, they are called the house of David. So the king of the south, the king of Judah, was not known as the king of Judah. He was known as the house of David. The house of David. That's what it was known as. Beit David. And that's what we found. The earliest stuff we found, including the references by Jews who talk about their kingdom, they call it Beit David. So the fact that this is recognized as David isn't surprising. It was called the house of David from the earliest times that we see it, not Judah, not the southern kingdom. No one called it the southern kingdom, but they did call it the house of David. And as you can see right here, as we start chapter 9, we have the house of the Lord, Beit Adonai, and we also have the Beit HaMelech. Now, this is the actual building. And so sometimes when we talk about the house of the Lord or the house of the king, we're literally talking about a building. Other times, we're talking about the dynasty. We're talking about passing from one king to the next, from father to son, and except for one exception, where there is a queen of Judah, and there was a queen, it's passed from father to son. So when we go through these lists, we have that. But there was a building, and this is what we're going to read about a little bit about what Solomon creates besides the house of God. So Rosemary, you want to take it away? Chapter 9.
Okay. When Solomon had finished building the house of the Lord and the royal palace and everything that Solomon had set his heart on constructing, the Lord appeared to Solomon a second time, as he had appeared to him at Gibeon.
We talked about this because I think this is where we finished, that Solomon actually had a vision of God at the beginning, which is, what do you want, Solomon? And Solomon says, I want to have wisdom. That's all I want. I want to be a good king. And of course, good answer. Solomon gets that, and he also gets these other things, which are wealth, power, a dynasty that will remain intact, assuming he does the right thing. So here now, he did this great project of building the temple. He also built his own place. And now God comes to him a second time. So he has a second visitation, which, by the way, seems to imply that God didn't talk to Solomon on a regular basis, or at least not like this. Maybe he had visions, maybe he had dreams, maybe he had prophets come and tell him things. Maybe he even had, we read that Solomon had a lot of gifts, like he could talk to animals and he could talk to angels and things like that. But maybe, again, what's significant is that God actually speaks to him, like God spoke to his father David, and comes to him sometimes in ways that are almost like a prophet. So here's what God says to him.
The Lord said to him, I have heard the prayer and the supplication which you have offered to me. I consecrate this house which you have built, and I set my name there forever. My eyes and my heart shall ever be there. As for you, if you walk before me as your father David walked before me, wholeheartedly and with uprightness, doing all that I have commanded you, and keeping my laws and my rules, Then I will establish your throne of kingship over Israel forever, as I promised your father David, saying, your line on the throne of Israel shall never end. But if you and your descendants turn away from me and do not keep the commandments and the laws which I have set before you, and go and serve other gods and worship them, then I will sweep Israel off the land which I gave them. I will reject a house which I have consecrated to my name, and Israel shall become a proverb and a byword among all peoples. And as for this house, once so exalted, everyone passing by it shall be appalled and shall hiss. And when they ask, why did the Lord do thus to the land and to this house? They shall be told, it is because they forsook the Lord their God, who freed them from the land of Egypt, and they embraced other gods and worshiped them and served them. Therefore, the Lord has brought all this calamity upon them.
Yeah. And so God basically says, if you pray to other gods, this is what we finished with last week. If you pray to other gods, I'll let this temple be destroyed. This temple that I reside in, that my presence is here, it doesn't matter. Because if you don't do the right things, we will see the end of this. And this is what we talked about for Tisha B'Av as we got into it, because Tisha B'Av was the time that happened. On the 9th of Av in 586, God allowed the temple to be destroyed and let this happen. And as we talked about last time, according to tradition, it's because the Jews were worshiping other gods. They were sacrificing other gods. They were doing human sacrifices. They were doing all the things they weren't supposed to do.
Do we believe that this was written
Before or after, we don't know.
We don't.
We don't know. There are people who say that this was written after it had already happened.
That's true.
I don't think necessarily it was, but again, we believe the first temple was destroyed because of idolatry. We believe the second temple, the temple that the Romans destroyed 2,000 years ago, 1,950 years ago, almost exactly, was destroyed because of our own hatred for each other, our own civil war. That's why we believe the Romans were able to destroy us, because we were fighting amongst ourselves. At least that's the way the rabbis teach it. So here's the Roman revolt against Vespasian, or against the Roman Empire during Vespasian, and then the Bar Kokhba revolt 60 years later. The first revolt, the one of started in around 66 and ended in about 72 with the fall of Masada, the last Jewish fortress. The reason that happened when it did was because the Jews obviously were sick and tired of Roman rule, but there was also internal strife amongst the Romans. The Romans had a year they called of 4 emperors, where there were 4 different emperors vying for the throne. And the Jews felt that was a good time to rebel, which makes sense. The Romans are dysfunctional. Let's use that as an opportunity to rebel. Later on, the Bar Kokhba revolt, they revolted against a fairly powerful and very capable Roman ruler named Hadrian, who ended up punishing them severely. But I think it was somewhat of a calculated move too, which was maybe Hadrian isn't strong enough to defeat us, because he was a young emperor at the time. And I think, again, every time that there was a rebellion against Rome by Jews or by anybody else, I say every time, sometimes it had to do with that country. A lot of times it had to do with the fact that Rome itself was going through troubles, and so people felt it was a good time to do it. It's the same thing that happens in America, when we're having an election year, countries sometimes decide this is a good time for us to exercise our power, or take advantage of internal problems in the United States to invade a country, let's say. Don't think that wasn't part of the calculations that the Russians made, which is that there's too much going on in the United States to pay attention to. There's not the will to deal with us right now. It happens when you're an empire, which we are. So what happens after this period of this great construction? And that's what we're going to pick up. So it's very interesting the way the book of Kings, which doesn't really tell us a lot about Solomon's personality. We really don't know a lot about him. We read about him showing his wisdom and with the story of the two prostitutes coming with whose baby is it, that famous story. But we really don't hear him a lot working with the people. We don't hear him as an individual. We don't hear about his ups and downs like we did about his father. We know so much about David, and we really don't know a lot about Solomon. I mean, he seems okay. He seems like a very smart guy. He seems like a guy who understands what his job is. He's a great builder, but we really don't know a lot about his personality. We don't know a lot about what makes him tick. David, we get a lot of information, arguably more about David than anyone else in the Bible, but we really get nothing about Solomon. We don't, other than it says that they did after they saw him with the prostitutes and figuring out whose baby it was, that they go, wow, this guy's really smart. But other than that, we really don't. Look, there seems to be, he seems to have a lot of political capital, if you will, that he can get these projects done. But let's read how he did it too, because here we'll get a little bit more. Yep. So here's what it says.
At the end of the 20 years, during which Solomon constructed the two buildings, the Lord's house and the royal palace, since King Hiram of Tyre had supplied Solomon with all the cedar and cypress timber and gold that he required, King Solomon in turn gave Hiram 20 towns in the region of Galilee.
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a second, because King Hiram is the king of the Phoenicians, right? That's in modern day Lebanon, right? That's north of Israel. Well, what it just said is that he gave him 10 towns. Now, did
20
he
towns.
literally give him 10 cities in the Galilee? So that would be in his area, right? Well, I mean, it's that far north, right? The Galilee is on the border with Lebanon. So did he just turn over these towns to him? I mean, first of all, it's God's land. It wouldn't seem that Solomon has the authority to do that. It's also tribal land. There's a tribe up there, or a few tribes. There's Dan, there's Asher, there's Naphtali. What did Solomon just say? Sorry, Naphtali, you got to give these towns over. Possible. It's also possible that he gave them the taxes from those towns, that he didn't actually turn them over, but he gave them the wealth of those towns. But it's also very possible that he gave him part of the territory of Israel, which would kind of be a bad thing from the standpoint of the tribes. And it would definitely be a bad thing from the standpoint of people who subscribe to the idea that no human being has the ability to give up 1 inch of Israel. Why is that relevant? Because there's people right now who say that in Israel right now. That no Israeli leader has the authority to give up 1 square inch of land that Israel has taken.
But we have.
We have. But there are Israelis who say that no prime minister has the ability, no government of Israel has the authority to give up 1 square foot of Israel's territory. And what's Israel's territory? Any part of the country that they conquered. Any part of the war, any part of Israel that was taken during the 67 war, the 73 war, technically the 56 war, any of those battles that Israel was in, where they risked their lives and Jews died, Israelis died in every one of those battles. Every battle where Israelis died, no government has the authority to then turn around and give the land to anybody, any other country. Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, any of Israel's neighbors who claim parts of Israel. And every one of those ones I just mentioned to you claim parts of Israel. There's a little thing that happened a month and a half ago that most of us didn't really probably hear or pay attention to or even know. So Israel just kind of came to an agreement with Saudi Arabia, which, like, people are like, well, what really happened? There's no ambassadors. There's no, you can't go back and forth to Saudi Arabia now on a flight, but Israel's now allowed to fly planes over Saudi Arabia. You might have heard that. So that was a win that Biden said he got. The Saudis said it's not such a big deal, but they had to, because what people really wanted was for Biden to get the Saudis to join the Abraham Accords and to say, like United Arab Emirates did, like all these other groups had done recently, the Moroccans, we're going to recognize Israel. We're going to have open relations with them, open trade. Didn't happen. But Israel did get this concession that they could fly planes over Saudi Arabia. It's a big deal because up until now, commercial planes, warplanes already, they had an agreement. That was an agreement that if Israel ever had to bomb Iran, they can fly over Saudi Arabia, which is a big deal. That they agreed on a long time ago because Saudi Arabia hates Iran, right? Saudi Arabia lives in fear of Iran. But here's what happened. Now Israeli commercial planes can fly over. And that's a big deal because before, if a plane from Israel was going to India, for example, it had to essentially go an hour and a half out of the way to get out of Saudi airspace. It's a lot of fuel and it's a lot of time. That's now done. Israeli planes can now fly over Saudi airspace. Now, what happened in Israel, and it really didn't affect anything in Israel, was that Saudi Arabia has been negotiating with Egypt over some islands in the Red Sea. Well, these are islands that Israel used to control after the 67 war, Six-Day War. Israel controlled those, gave them back to Egypt, and Egypt just gave them to Saudi Arabia. But the deal is Israel had to sign off on that transfer of land from Egypt to Saudi Arabia. And again, these are islands that are in the Red Sea. They're mainly for shipping oil out of the Red Sea, Gulf of Aqaba or the Gulf of Eilat, depending on what you call it. But remember, Saudi Arabia and Israel are only about 6 miles apart from each other in that area by Eilat, which we're about to read about. But if you think about it, down there, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Israel all come together down by Eilat. And some people think that one day, maybe that area will be a major port that will bring together those powers of the Middle East. Look, again, it wasn't discussed a lot, and again, it didn't really affect Israel because Israel wasn't controlling those islands anymore, but they had. And because of that, it required Israel to sign off and allow Saudi Arabia to essentially take those islands. I'm just going to show you real quick what I'm talking about. Exactly. So let me just show you a quick little site. And we're about to see this. We're about to read about this because this area of Eilat was important even during King Solomon's time. And we're about to read about it. So here's Eilat. Here's the city and the port of Eilat. You can see there's a port right here. So here's the ports. There's a couple little ports here. One's more of a maritime, this is the marina. This is where, like, the people bring their yachts and their little sailboats and stuff. Judith, there you go. And then you also have a commercial maritime port right here. So that's the port. Folks, this is the border. This is Egypt. This is this is Jordan right here. This is Aqaba. So Eilat and Aqaba, and when we go to Petra, we cross right over here. We go right through this border crossing, and you go into it's called the Ravine border crossing. You cross into Jordan. So you can see Jordan right there. That's Aqaba. But right down here, I'm going to go down here. You can see this is 1.5 miles. This isn't very big. Going down here, folks, that's the border of Saudi Arabia. So here's Jordan, and here's Saudi Arabia. This is all Saudi Arabia. And this, folks, right here is Egypt. So this is Egypt, this is Israel, that's Jordan, and that's Saudi Arabia. So that all comes together right here in this Red Sea area of Eilat. Yes, and so Israel was blockaded in 67. Israel's port of Eilat, the Red Sea port, was blockaded by the Egyptian Navy was right here, blockading it so that ships couldn't go in and out. And we're not talking about a very big place, right? Because this is right here. This is 2.5 miles from here to here. And as I said, this is about 6 miles, 5 or 6 miles from Aqaba down to Saudi Arabia. So most people don't think about Saudi Arabia being that close to Israel. It's not really from the standpoint of like where most of the Saudi Arabian places that we talk about, when we talk about, the places like Medina, right? Mecca and Medina, right where Mecca is. This is down here, right?
How far is Jordan from, Jerusalem from Jordan? Because Jordan
So,
before 67 actually.
yes, so this was all controlled by the Jordanians, right? From 48 to 67. This is the capital of Jordan, Amman. And you can see Amman is here and Jerusalem is here. Well, wait, this is 5 miles.
Was that all?
So Jerusalem to the border here, which is where Jericho is, right down here. This road is a little curvy, but not like it used to be. This is about a half hour.
Oh, okay.
This is about a half hour to here. From here to here, and the crossing's actually right here. That's the Dead Sea. The crossing here, the border crossing is here, and then it's about another half hour, 45 minutes up to Amman. So it's about an hour and a half. Now it really takes about 2.5 hours, 3 hours because of the border crossing, because you have to go through security. And back in actually up until the 90s, you couldn't even do this crossing.
Oh, really?
Well, you could, but it took a long time and there was no stamping of a passport. You had to go through bureaucratic diplomatic channels to go across this. You couldn't, because Jordan and Israel didn't have relations until 94 or 96, whatever.
Most people went to Cyprus and then did it. If you wanted to travel from Israel to Jordan, you'd go through Cyprus. That's what we did.
You had to go from here to here, back out here. Now, this is only a half-hour flight. I mean, it's a very short flight, but you had to go from here to back here. And it's still like that, by the way. If you want to go from, for, let's say, Damascus, for example, not that anyone really wants to go to Damascus right now, but if you want to go to Damascus, you pretty much have to fly up to Istanbul and then back down. Yeah. You can't really go from anywhere from Syria to Israel. So there's no relations, right? They're still technically at war. So these are issues that are interesting because we're going to read about them here in the Bible, and there's still issues here. But at this time, yeah.
I just want to share with Rosemary will remember this. When we went to July,
Yeah.
Rosemary and I were walking like towards Jordan, just taking a long walk, and 3 Jordanian jets came and they did like a loop or something like that. They were showing off for us.
Over Jordan.
Yeah, the Jordanians.
They were practicing the missing man formation.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, the Jordanians,
They tipped their wing. I remember they tipped their wing.
so the Jordanian Air Force is not anything like the Israeli Air Force, but they do have American planes and they do rely on American trade. Israel does not have any relations with Lebanon or Syria. They're still technically at war. Lebanon claims that Israel is occupying some territories up here. Syria obviously claims that Israel has no right to the Golan Heights, which are here, which Israel annexed in the 80s. And not many countries recognize this as part of Israel, though the United States did a couple years ago recognize the Golan as part of Israel. But the Syrians demand the Golan back as part of any negotiation. And Lebanon is very much controlled by Syria and Iran, and is one of Israel's biggest problems, because Hezbollah controls much of the country now, and that is a organization very linked to Iran and is not friendly at all to Israel. Israel occupied southern Lebanon for about 15 years, almost 20 years. Israel occupied the southern part of Lebanon to keep it from being a place where Hezbollah could operate out of. Eventually, Israel pulled out because they were losing many soldiers. It was not a popular occupation, if you will. Israel had no intention of conquering the area. They were hoping to turn it over to a friendlier group. Didn't happen. There used to be Christian Lebanese in this area. They've all been driven out. Christian Lebanese were very pro-Israel, but they don't live there anymore. Here's Tyre. This is where King Hiram was. He was from Tyre.
Where have the Christian Lebanese gone?
To America, to Canada, to France. They've gotten out to places where they could be safe. Some have even gone to Israel, but most of them have gone to America, Canada, France, places where they speak French. Remember, France controlled Lebanon after World War I. This was France controlled Syria and Lebanon. Britain controlled Israel and Jordan. That was part of the agreement after World War I, where this was all part of the Ottoman Empire, and literally the British and the French drew a line right here and said, you guys get this, the British get this, and we get this. It was the Sykes-Picot Treaty. So Lebanon and Syria went to France, Israel and Jordan went to the British, and technically Saudi Arabia too. But Saudi Arabia always had a little bit more authority, but it was definitely under the British sphere. So was Egypt. So yeah, so this is interesting because it's ancient history and it's also modern history. Lebanon, you can see, is a very small country. Lebanon only goes from here down to here. So it's even smaller than Israel. So there's Lebanon and there's Israel. Israel's not very big. So Galilee is right up here. This area from here to here. So this area right here is the area we call the Galilee. This area up here is the Golan. So when we talk about the Galilee and the Golan, it's a huge part of Israel. It is the entire northern part of Israel.
Haifa isn't part of
What?
the Galilee. Is Haifa considered
Yeah.
part of the
Yeah.
Galilee?
Uh-huh.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, we don't usually talk about it as necessarily part of the Galilee because we consider it like such a big city. But yeah, that region is definitely that region is definitely can't get it to zoom back in. Yeah, we this whole area is Galilee. So when you look at maps of Israel and they talk about regions, there's 6 administrative regions of Israel. Tel Aviv is its own administrative region, but the northern part right here includes all of this, right about up to here is all considered Galilee. So this is the area, just so you know, I mean, this is the line of the West Bank right here. You can see that the line from the West Bank, from Nazareth to the West Bank, is also, you can see, only about 5 or 6 miles. And the distance from Haifa to Nazareth, you can see, is also only about 15, 20 miles. It takes about a half hour to get there, but it's only about a half hour. And from here, from Haifa to Tiberias, which is the end of the Galilee, is only about 25 miles as the crow flies, but it takes about an hour and a half, 2 hours to drive that, because you have to go around here and then across here. But it's very, very small. It's very narrow. And again, you can see how close it is to Tyre. So back in the days when there were no countries, right, when it was all part of the Ottoman Empire, to drive from Tyre, there was a train that went from Haifa to Tyre, and it took a day. You know, it was a 3-hour, 4-hour train ride to get from Haifa to Tyre. That was it. And the Turks built it, and the British took it over when they controlled it, and the French controlled Lebanon. But this train, this is where Rosh Hanikra is. This is the northern part of Israel. This is the train, went right to here, and it kept going down to here, and make a couple stops. Right now, we've gone up to Rosh Hanikra. This is the border. The train tracks. There's a tunnel. It's shut off. It hasn't been open in 100 years almost, or not 100 years, 70 or 80 years. It hasn't been opened. The train ends. Because Israel you can't go, they're at war. So this Rosh Hanikra, you can see where we are. We've gone on the cable cars. This is where the grottos are. This is literally, that's the Lebanese border right there. That's right. Rosh Hanikra right here is the grottos. So for everybody, I'm getting everybody excited about our trip to Israel. Some of you are actually going to be there. This is Lebanese? Years ago, yeah. Not for a long time. Most of those Lebanese were Christian Lebanese, by the way, too. But that's unfortunately not a lot of Jordanians work in Israel. No, it hasn't. The peace treaties with Israel and its neighbors have not gone well in reality.
It was with King, whatever his name.
King Hussein, yeah, it was better with King Hussein, but and it was still new, but they've never had the kind of cooperation and trade. The reality is that right now Israel is running more trade with United Arab Emirates, UAE, than it is with their next door neighbors. Partly because it has to do with the fact that UAE actually has a functioning modern economy. Egypt and Jordan do not. No, they just don't have. Yeah, but there's a way of interfacing with the countries, right? And you can't interface with it. First of all, Egypt is an immense country with terrible poverty and with just an immense amount of people. It's a giant country. But UAE is a country that's roughly the size of Israel. It has a relatively comparable GDP, and they can do trade with them. And UAE has, as you've seen from the amazing buildings and construction that they have there, they have a lot of foreign investment. And so does Israel. So they can function equally. I was looking at recently, Israel's economy, Israel's GDP is pretty much on par with places like Holland, and there aren't many places in the world that have the GDP that Israel does that's not in Europe or in America or Canada or Japan.
Mostly tourism there?
Israel?
Yeah.
No, it's almost all electronics and high tech and
I know it's
pharmaceuticals and technology. I mean, it's basically a high tech economy and a global economy, which none of these other countries have, including Jordan, including to some extent. I mean, Saudi Arabia obviously has petrodollars, but the UAE is really functioning as yes, but UAE is functioning as a commercial economy. Yes. What happens though, and this is why it's relevant for what we're looking at today, is because Solomon established a commercial empire where his country, our country, Israel, was at the crossroads of the world. And he knew that Israel didn't really have any natural resources. Israel still doesn't have any natural resources, though they did find a huge natural gas deposit, which is making Israel almost completely self-reliant when it comes to its energy needs, which is something that people have also not talked about. One of the reasons why Israel is in a much better situation than it was 20, 30 years ago is the Tamar and Leviathan natural gas fields, which, by the way, could wind up even being more crucial if Russia and Ukraine continue to fight, because Israel's natural gas could wind up also going to Europe.
Really?
Yeah, could be huge. Yeah, it's an enormous natural gas deposit, and it has the potential of. It's already changed Israel's reliance on foreign oil. The natural gas, I was just reading about it recently, is I was interested in it to see if it actually could be used for Europe, if it could get people off of, because Europe obviously is still importing Russian natural gas, which is giving Russia money that they shouldn't have. So it'd be interesting to see if Israel's natural gas could pivot and allow that. It's not big enough to do everything that Russia does, but it's pretty big. I looked at how many trillions but you just can't get that much out of it at a time. I mean, there's a limit to how much you can actually tap at once. So that's the problem. And obviously Russia has a lot more natural gas fields than Israel does, but this one is huge. And it's also, again, goes through Cyprus and then can go through Europe. Anyways, so Solomon is about to do the same thing. So, but what he does is he gives Hiram, the king of Tyre, which is Phoenicia, this huge part of Israel or wealth of Israel. But it says here he got cedar and timber, right? So there was something that he got in exchange. But there's something else that happens here. Let's look at what else happens here.
But when Hiram came from Tyre to inspect the towns that Solomon had given him, he was not pleased with them. My brother, he said, what sort of towns are these you've given me? So they were named the land of Kabul, as is still the case.
And you can see his mean Kabul, maybe meaning not Kabul like in Afghanistan, but Kabul from Hebrew, meaning like maybe worthless, something that is nothing.
Nada.
Hiram was not impressed with what he got in exchange.
However, Hiram sent the king 120 talents of gold.
Now, 120 talents of gold is quite a big, it's quite a lot of gold. And so it doesn't seem Hiram is 100% satisfied with it, but 120 talents of gold, and I will show you again to understand how much we're talking about here, how much the weight is. It's about, no, that's not quite what I wanted to show you, but a talent is in Hebrew, a kikar is, here we go. Yeah, here we go. This is, the talent was the heaviest or largest biblical unit of measurement for weight, equal to about 75 pounds or 35 kilos. So 75 pounds of gold, well, a pound of gold today is worth about, I think about $24,000. It's a lot.
Hmm.
Right? We don't even, we usually talk about gold in ounces. We don't talk about gold in pounds. But if you have a talent, which is 75 pounds, and you have 120 of them, that's 9,000. That's 9,000 pounds, which, you know, based on 23,000, you can check my math on that, by the way. I'm not sure it's $23,000, but I think it's pretty close, a pound of gold. But that comes out in today's dollars of about $200 million that he gave him of gold. Let me just see. I'll look. A pound of gold is 20. That was pretty close. It's 22,392. It's $1,800 an ounce. So a troy ounce or whatever. So it's $23,000 a pound. Or $22,000 a pound. So that's $200 million that he gave him for that property. That's a lot. It's a lot. Now, there's something else that Solomon is about to do, which was
This was the purpose of the forced labor which Solomon imposed. It was to build the house of the Lord, his own palace, the Millo, the wall of Jerusalem, and to fortify Hazor, Megiddo, and Gezer. Pharaoh, king of Egypt, had come up and captured Gezer. He destroyed it by fire, killed the Canaanites who dwelt in the town, and gave it as a dowry to his daughter, Solomon's wife.
so what just happened? Solomon, it just tells us kind of off the cuff, impose forced labor, which is a mas. Same word as we read about the Egyptians would impose forced labor on their people and on us. It's a conscription. It's a forced, you don't have a choice, which is why it says forced labor. He used that work crew to build the temple, his own palace, the Millo. And if you look at the translation, it's a citadel, but the Millo is an area that we believe we've excavated it in Jerusalem. A wall of Jerusalem, which is not the same wall that's around there now. It's also not the Western Wall, but it's a wall that Solomon built around the city. And also these cities, Hazor, Megiddo, and Gezer. We've uncovered all these cities. We've excavated all of them in the last 20, 30 years. Some with more efficiency than others. there are extensive records of what's been found in these places. They go back to Solomon's reign. Do they corroborate everything in the Bible? Not exactly, but there are things in there that are corroborated by the excavations, especially at Hatzor and Megiddo, that kind of lead us to believe that. Gezer has not been as excavated. And Gezer is outside of Jerusalem. It's not far from Jerusalem, the town. And what it says about Gezer is that Pharaoh had destroyed it. And it was a Canaanite city before, like all these places. Jerusalem was a Canaanite city. It was inhabited by the Jebusites. Hatzor and Megiddo were also and Gezer were Canaanite cities. In this case, it says that the Egyptians had destroyed it and kind of taken it over, and that the Egyptians gave it to Solomon as dowry when he married the daughter of Pharaoh. We read about that. He married Pharaoh's daughter, and it says that he got Gezer in the deal. By the way, that seems to imply there's other parts of Israel that are controlled by the Egyptians. Because if Gezer was, what else did the Egyptians control? I mean, okay, maybe they didn't, but it seems that they did. It seems like Egypt still had tremendous amount of power in the region, which makes sense. So Solomon builds up these areas. They're in different parts of the country. Megiddo's in the north. Hatzor is also in the north, but Gezer is kind of in the center. These are areas that don't seem to be reliant on a tribe. They tend to seem, well, when we see them as Solomon's capitals. We see them as Solomon's cities, not as cities that necessarily helped the tribes that they were a part of. And this is Solomon's continued kind of redrawing the map of Israel and saying, I don't care about the tribes. I care about my administrative regions. I care about cities that I control where I have my own forts and I have my own soldiers. That seems to be what Solomon does. And it makes sense, because if the tribes have too much power, they're gonna revolt against them, or they're not gonna pay taxes, or they're not gonna give them soldiers and workers to help build. So here's what he does. Here's what Solomon does.
So Solomon fortified Gezer, north Beth Horon, Baalit, and Tamar in the wilderness in the land of Judah, and all of Solomon's garrison towns, chariot towns, and cavalry towns, everything that Solomon set his heart on building in Jerusalem and in the Lebanon and throughout the territory that he ruled.
Yeah, and here it doesn't talk about the Galilee. It doesn't say the Galilee. It actually says the Lebanon, which is interesting because they're talking about northern Israel. But they don't call it the north and the south. They call it Jerusalem and Lebanon. And it says that he built these towns. Again, this is a way for the king to be in power. Because if he just says, hey, the tribes, you take care of your territory, right? That's your territory, that's your territory, that's your territory. Everybody just send your taxes. That's not what he did. He literally had cities in each of these, not every one of the tribes, but he had them in each parts of the country. He basically said, this is the way I'm ruling the country. I don't care about the tribal borders. So it'd almost be like if the federal government said, I don't care about the states. We're going to rule this country, or we're going to govern this country by regions, so that the Midwest will be ruled this way, and the East Coast will be ruled this way, and the South will be ruled this way, and the West Coast and the Pacific Northwest, you guys will be ruled this way.
That makes sense.
Which, by the way, it does make sense, and to some extent it is done. Because everybody knows that each of those regions has their own stuff, their own priorities, and their own way of kind of dealing with things. And so sometimes, you know, we treat Washington and Oregon like they're the same place. We treat New England like it's an area. You don't necessarily refer to it as Maine, Vermont, North New Hampshire, or whatever. We just call it New England. So there are definitely regional areas that we do have in this country, and kind of wavers, whether we see them as regions or we see them as states. And these issues are still issues, right? Because, right now we're having discussions over whether states have certain rights or whether the federal government has those rights. And when it comes down to it, you and I know, because every time they show a map of where abortion is going to be legal or not legal, it's by region, folks. Now, with some minor exceptions. In the Northeast, it'll be legal. It'll be not legal in the South. It'll be legal in the Pacific Northwest. It won't be legal in Utah and Montana. We see these regions, folks. You know it. So we do have that in our country too. But Solomon seemed to be more concerned with that rather than, again, ruling and making sure that each tribe had their own stuff. He doesn't seem to care about that at all. And of
That
course,
seems like it's written- this part was written after the destruction, when they weren't tribes.
could be, but it also could be a concerted effort on Solomon's part to just act like the tribes don't exist. And that's why I think the tribes, again, eventually, especially the northern tribes, said, we're not putting up with this. For centuries, we've had tribal leaders. We have elders who represent our tribes. Where do they get to, where's their say? Where does it say these tribes do anything? That's what Solomon had a problem. So here's what an interesting thing that Solomon, according to the Bible, does. This is where I think this was written at the time of Solomon, by the way. Maybe not, but I believe it was. Because read what happens.
All the people that were left of the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites who were not of the Israelite stock, those of their descendants who remain in the land, and whom the Israelites were not able to annihilate, of these Solomon made a slave force, as is still the case.
Now, here it just said that the imposed slave labor, the mas, and here it says the word mas right here, the mas. Correct, but they were supposed to have killed them. And the Bible says they were supposed to have annihilated them, and they didn't annihilate them. And instead he made them slave labor. I don't know that that's the case, but somebody wrote that to make Solomon happy, or with the knowledge that Solomon needs to have a cover for what happened. Because it does seem like Solomon didn't just make these guys his slaves, his workers. He made other people his workers too, including Israelites. So to me, I guess it is possible that it was written by someone afterwards, but it seems like somebody actually cared about what Solomon thought and wrote this so that Solomon wouldn't be offended by the fact that we're holding him accountable for what he actually did. I'm only going to tell you that when we get to the story of how Solomon starts losing his kingdom, it's because of this. And it couldn't, they couldn't both be true. They can't both be true. Either the people in the north who were being made to be as slave labor were not Israelites, or they were. If they were Israelites, they had a reason to be upset. So again, did he have authority to do this? Absolutely. To the extent that these people could have been killed, or their ancestors should have been killed, and they weren't killed. So again, if anybody has any question about what happened to the Canaanites, at least by the time of Solomon, they're still there and they're slave labor. I don't know that, look, I don't believe that that was the only slave labor that he used. And I don't believe that every Canaanite was a slave to him. I just don't believe it. I don't. I believe that some Canaanites continued to be people of power. Maybe he was able to take away all their power. Maybe by that point, the Canaanites just don't have enough power to resist Solomon. We don't, but here it says quite clearly that they're still there. Now, the Phoenicians were Canaanites. We also don't know how much of our ancestry was Canaanite. There are theories that Israelites are very much Canaanite too. Because if Abraham and his family came in with a few members of their family, over many generations, they would have expanded, but they wouldn't have expanded unless they married Canaanites. That means we're probably a little Canaanite, right? Look, we know we're Canaanite. Judah was married to a woman named Tamar. Well, wasn't married to her. He had kids with her. He was her daughter-in-law that he was kind of tricked into having a baby with. Judah's ancestor, David's ancestor, our ancestor, Tamar, was a Canaanite. The Bible says that she's a Canaanite. So we know that there's Canaanite blood in. We know we're walking around with Canaanite blood. The Phoenicians are Canaanites. The only reason they're not even called Phoenician in the Bible. He's called King Hiram. He's called King Hiram. He's not called King Hiram of the Phoenicians. He's called King Hiram of Tyre because that was his city. But the difference between Tyre and a Canaanite city in the north of Israel, let's say Hatzor or Gezer in the middle, there was no difference. They spoke the same language. They prayed to the same God, Baal. They had the same names. There are cousins, or at least our relatives. Some of them are our grandparents. And the Phoenicians ended up settling most of the Mediterranean centuries before there were Greeks or Romans, even emerging out of their caves. The Phoenicians established colonies in North Africa, in Greece, in Spain, in Turkey, in Italy. There are Phoenician colonies everywhere. And the Phoenicians were so powerful that later on, some of their descendants, the Carthaginians, went to war against Rome and almost destroyed Rome. And one of the most famous Carthaginian generals was a guy named Hannibal, who you've heard of, because he took elephants over the Alps and tried to destroy Rome with elephants. He was a Phoenician. He was a Carthaginian. He was a Canaanite. His ancestors came from Lebanon and Israel. His name Hanubal means the grace of the god Baal. His name Hanubal is the same as the name Yochanan in Hebrew, which means the grace of God, or Hanael, or Hannah in Hebrew, Hannah, which means grace. Hanubal means the grace of Baal. It's the same as the name Yochanan, the grace of Yud-Heh-Vav. That's the name Hanubal. It's Hebrew, it's Canaanite. We'll look at their ships in a second, because there is a theory that the Phoenicians might have even come into America. People actually proved this by taking a Phoenician constructed ship, using the same elements, same tools, the same wood that the Canaanites, the Phoenicians would have had, and built a ship that sailed across the Atlantic. They sailed it to North America. So is it possible? Yes. It's possible the Phoenicians arrived in North America long before the Vikings, long before Columbus. We'll see. Don't know that for sure. Look, the Mormons definitely believe that it happened. They might not be wrong. I mean, we don't have any evidence for it, but it could have happened. It could have happened that there were Canaanites, or at least Phoenicians, maybe not Israelites, that came to this land. Just don't have any record of it. Zero record of it. But it is possible that it happened. All right. So,
But he did not reduce any Israelites to slavery. They served rather as warriors and as his attendants, officials, and officers, and as commanders of his chariotry and cavalry. These were the prefects that were in charge of Solomon's works and were foremen over the people engaged in the work, who numbered 550. As soon as Pharaoh's daughter went up from the city of David to the palace that he had built for her, he built the Millo.
Yeah, now this is really interesting. It talks about all these things that Solomon did. And it says he did not reduce any Israelites to slavery. That seems to me to be,
Kind of contradicts what he said before.
well, it says here he put Canaanites into the
No,
forced.
But before that, he was talking about, they were talking about forced labor.
Yeah, there's, here it doesn't say who the people were.
Hmm.
I only want to tell you later on, it definitely says that some of these forced laborers were Jews or Israelites. Okay. So that's what I want to say. But here it almost goes out of its way to say that they're not. It basically says that they were the foremen, which is again, sounds a little similar to what happened to us in Egypt, where we had foremen and we also had they had taskmasters and then we had the workers. Yeah. And so this is a weird thing. It also is very weird when you talk about Bat Paro. Because the last time we heard about a daughter of Pharaoh was during the time of Moses. And so here's Bat Paro, who's part of Solomon's life. And so when she comes up and lives there, he built the Milo, which again is a citadel. It's a kind of a building that was part of David and Solomon's, David's part of Jerusalem. And then Solomon's buildup of Jerusalem, but it's in Jerusalem, the Milo.
Solomon used to offer burnt offerings and sacrifices of well-being 3 times a year on the altar that he had built for the Lord, and he used to offer incense on the one that was before the Lord, and he kept the house in repair.
Okay, well, he did what he was supposed to do, which is he kept the temple going. Okay, that's all good. He did it on the Shalosh Regalim, as we talked about, Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. People came up, he offered sacrifices. He did what he was supposed to do when it came to running the temple. Everything seems to be good. Now, here's where we get back to what I told you was one of the reasons we talked about Elot.
King Solomon also built a fleet of ships at Etzion Geber, which is near Elot, on the shore of the Sea of Reeds in the land of Edom. Hiram sent servants of his with the fleet, mariners who were experienced on the sea, to serve with Solomon's men.
Yep. So it seems right here, a couple things. First of all, that Solomon actually paid for a fleet of ships to be built, which seems to mean that they did not have a fleet of ships before. Maybe they did on the Mediterranean. Maybe they had some trade going out of Jaffa and Haifa and Dor and some of these cities that were, but we know that the Philistines control that area. Solomon never extricated the Philistines from his country. And so the idea that the Philistines maybe controlled the coast of the Mediterranean, keep in mind, means that if they had the authority over the coast on the Mediterranean, and it appears that they had control even beyond Ashkelon and Ashdod, those cities that were their main ports, the Philistines kind of controlled the Mediterranean, that he needed his own port. And that port was in the Red Sea, not the Mediterranean. So that's a pretty interesting thing, as we showed, that Israel has these two areas, both in the Mediterranean and then also in the Red Sea, where they could have trade. Now, just to show you real quick, what would that mean? That means if this area of Israel is controlled by the Philistines, and I'm talking about literally this coastal area is controlled by the Philistines, then Israel needs to have another area where they can move their goods out of. So if this area is controlled by Philistines, then if you go down here, you can control this area down here. Why was that a better port for them? Well, not necessarily a better port for them because they still relied on the Philistines here. But let's say they had to pay the Philistines whenever they wanted to have any goods go off the Mediterranean. Down here, he can control what happens out of this area. Why? Because at that time, There was no power. The Egyptians were over here. Probably the Egyptians also had some ships here, but this is where the Egyptians were based. If Israel has a chance to control this port, then they can control trade going down here into Africa. And the trade would have come out of here, gone down to Africa, here, gone into Yemen down here, come around the Horn of Africa here, which is Somalia, where all they had the problems with all the pirates over here. And then you come around here to Oman. You come around here to India. Remember, in those days, the ships hugged the shore, right? They wouldn't go too far away from the shore. They'd go along here, right? Go to India, maybe even around here to China, the Philippines. But there were Philistines were here. Phoenicians and Israelites are coming out of here. And that means they could also go to Africa, all along Africa. Yes. And let's show a couple of them right now. This is what they look like from the Egyptian depictions, bas-reliefs of the time. This is what the Phoenician ships look like. They could take tons of stuff on there. I'll show you what they look like today when they were reconstructed. Here's one that was reconstructed. So this is the one that they took across the Atlantic.
Recently, we saw the Mayflower, and they didn't even have a steering wheel; they had a stick. So I can imagine what they had on this.
Yep. So this you can see they put on advanced
They've
avionics.
got a generator and some
Advanced,
electronic gear there.
Telemetry. So they had, they put up that stuff there, but everything else was reconstructed based on what it was like 3,000 years ago. So this is what a ship looked like, a Phoenician ship looked like 3,000 years ago. The reason why I wanted to show you that is for what we're about to see. But this is what the ships would have looked like that were built by the Phoenicians. That's what it said they were. It says that Solomon had the Phoenicians do it because the Phoenicians had experience doing it. And that Hiram gave him these mariners. These were Phoenician crew. And it says why? Because they knew how to see. It says Yadea Hayam. They knew how to sail. So whatever these guys could do, it wasn't what we were doing before. So whatever, we have this story about the tribe of Zebulun, that they were merchants, right? And it says in Jacob's blessing that the tribe of Zebulun are merchants that are they sail on the seas. It doesn't seem like this. But the Phoenicians were able to do was on a whole nother level than what the tribe of Zebulun would have done, or maybe even what the Philistines had done. Because the Philistines seemed really good at attacking areas. They seemed to be really almost like an ancient version of the Vikings. They would sail their ships into an area and just conquer it. But what the Phoenicians were more interested in doing was actually trade. So it's the difference of being able to build a ship for warfare and to put troops on them. Versus,
Don't we think that the Philistines were Phoenician? Or they came from Crete?
The Philistines are not Phoenicians. So the Philistines, understand the Philistines, they came from Greece or ancient Greece. It wasn't really Greece yet, but that area of Greece. I mean, they weren't Greek yet, is what I should say. They were called the Sea People. So they came from Crete, they came from Cyprus, they came from the Aegean, and they went to Israel. The Phoenicians were Canaanites, people from Lebanon, people from Israel who went everywhere. So the Philistines were in a region of Israel, Greece, maybe Cyprus, and Crete. The Phoenicians went everywhere. They did stuff that the Philistines never did. And again, think about the Philistines being European coming to our neck of the woods, whereas the Phoenicians were Middle Easterners who went everywhere. And I say Middle Easterners because, again, they're Middle Easterners as we are Middle Eastern. They were from the Levant. They're from the area we call the Levant, which is Israel, Lebanon, Syria. That's where the Canaanites, the Phoenicians came from. So think about it as almost reverse. The Philistines came from Europe went to the Near East. The Phoenicians were Near Eastern who went to Europe and to everywhere. I'll just show you real quick. I didn't bring it up, but I'll bring it up right now so you can see it. What the Phoenicians did, the Phoenician around the Mediterranean in particular. Let me just show you a map real quick. I wasn't planning on showing you necessarily this, but I will. I'll just show this real quick. So this is an okay map. Let me just show it. You can see this is Phoenician. So starting here in Tyre and Sidon, you can see Carthage. That's all North Africa, from Egypt all the way across to Morocco. You can see southern Spain. You can see Italy, Sicily. That's Sardinia, Corsica, but also Sicily. You can see there are Phoenician. You can see Phoenician colonies in Athens. Yeah, but there are people. These were colonies, so there were people that were Phoenician that were living there. This is all modern day Turkey, and you can see. So this is a little bit after. This is a little bit after the Philistines' power wanes, because you can see Phoenicia was also controlling our what was Philistine area. But yeah, you can see the Mediterranean all the way around is Phoenician. So this is a pretty impressive. This map is actually. Let me just show you this map. I don't know if this shows you how many different cities were controlled by the Phoenicians or Phoenician colonies. So this is from the time of King Solomon up until the 6th century. So this is all before Greece is even a power. There's Greece. This is Athens and the Spartans and that kind of stuff. These are all cities that the Phoenicians settled. We found we've excavated these areas everywhere. Look how much there is. And why is this important? Because if it's not for the Phoenicians, folks, we don't have an alphabet. The alphabet that we have was spread by the Phoenicians. The Greeks don't have letters unless it's the Phoenicians, for the Phoenicians. There's no alphabet. That's why the English alphabet and the Hebrew alphabet are close, right? Because we have alpha, beta, gamma in Latin and Greek and Latin, and we have Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, because of the Phoenicians. So Solomon relied on these people, and here's where we're going to get to the Queen of Sheba. This is connection. This is why this is so important. Here we go.
They came to Ophir. There they obtained gold in the amount of 420 talents, which they delivered to King Solomon.
Okay, so that's into chapter 9. Now, it says here they took 420 talents, which I told you is a talent is 75 pounds. And they had 420 of those, which I told you before. We looked at 120 talents was equal to about $200 million. So this is about 4 times more, not quite 4 times more. This is 3 times more. So this is about $600 million in today's money. Is it possible? Absolutely. Is it possible based on the weight? Yes. Well, it's a lot of gold. Don't get me wrong. But could it have gone on those ships? We just read that he had a fleet of ships. Any one of those ships, you could have put 420 talents on. So that's very doable. Those ships that I showed you, any one of these ships could take 420 talents of silver. I looked at the tonnage that these take, any of them. So you need to have a fleet of ships. You could put that much gold on one of those ships. It's a lot, but you definitely could. You probably don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, right? But you definitely could have. So is this a possible amount? Yes. Here's the problem. Where's Ophir? We don't know. Because if Ophir is a place that we can go to, then maybe there's still gold there. Right? So people have been wondering where Ophir
Looking
is
for King
long time.
Solomon's mines for a long time.
Yes. Right, Rosemary. What were you going to say? So how do we know about those?
H. Rider Haggard wrote a book,
That's right.
a pulp
Turned into
novel.
movies, right?
Right.
Quartermain.
A movie.
Helen Quartermain. So King Solomon's mines have been, people have been trying to find them for a long time. King Solomon's mines. Are they in Africa? Are they in Asia? Some people say they're in Philippines. I've heard speculation of where Ophir is. We don't know. Most people think it's in Africa. Some people think it's in South Africa. Why? Because there's immense gold deposits in South Africa. So is it possible? Absolutely. I showed you how far the Phoenicians sailed. We know how far they sailed. It's very possible that they went there, especially if they hugged the coast. They easily could have gone to Sub-Saharan Africa.
Have we found evidence of the Phoenicians in Sub-Saharan Africa?
No. But there are descriptions or there's accounting of the trade routes that were still being used by the Phoenicians that went out to further than along the Asian, going to India and probably China. So the mileage, the route that they would have gone is not as far as they would have to go to like South Africa is closer than those places. So no. So the answer is we don't know for sure. It's definitely plausible. It's possible. And based on the amount of gold that was found, we don't think it could be anywhere but those places like South Africa.
Remember, the world was flat back then.
So where is Ophir? We're not sure, but most people place it in Africa. If you look at most,
That goes with
descriptions
the, well, we're going to get to them, so let's see it.
and here we get in the next line, as I promised, to this line.
The Queen of Sheba heard of Solomon's fame through the name of the Lord, and she came to test him with hard questions. She arrived in Jerusalem with a very large retinue, with camels bearing spices, a great quantity of gold, and precious stones. When she came to Solomon, she asked him all that she had in mind. Solomon had answers for all her questions. There was nothing that the king did not know, nothing to which he could not give her an answer. When the Queen of Sheba observed all of Solomon's wisdom and the palace he had built, the fare of his table, the seating of his courtiers, the service and attire of his attendants, and his wine service, and the burnt offerings that he offered at the house of the Lord, she was left breathless. She said to the king, "The report I heard in my own land about you and your wisdom was true. But I did not believe the reports until I came and saw with my own eyes that not even the half had been told me. Your wisdom and wealth surpassed the reports that I had heard." How fortunate are your men, and how fortunate are these, your courtiers, who are always in attendance on you and can hear your wisdom. Praised be the Lord your God, who delighted in you and set you on the throne of Israel. It is because of the Lord's everlasting love for Israel that he made you king to administer justice and righteousness. She presented the king with 120 talents of gold and a large quantity of spices and precious stones. Never again did such a vast quantity of spices arrive as that which the Queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. Moreover, Hiram's fleet, which carried gold from Ophir, brought in from Ophir a huge quantity of almug wood and precious stones.
Yeah, but I wanted to show you something. We'll keep going. We'll read one more thing.
The king, could you scroll down a little bit? Cut off the first line. The king used the almug wood for decorations in the house of the Lord and in the royal palace, and for harps and lyres for the musicians. Such a quantity of almug wood has never arrived or been seen to this day. King Solomon in turn gave the Queen of Sheba everything she wanted and asked for, in addition to what King Solomon gave her out of his royal bounty. Then she and her attendants left and returned to her own land.
So that's 13 verses. That's the entire story of Solomon and Sheba. We've made entire movies over this chapter. So we just read the story. What do you, if you've never heard or seen the movie, or you don't remember anything about Solomon and Sheba, what just happened? Did they have sex? Doesn't say so. Doesn't say they did. Is there a love story here? I don't know. Maybe. Doesn't say so. We think that there's it's part of the legend of them. But what would you say this is a story about? Like, what's this a story of?
It's a story about a trade deal.
Yeah, it's a story of a trade deal. It's a story of an agreement between people who are normally not interacting with each other very often because they're kind of on different ends of the world, or they're not neighbors.
What did she gain?
What? Somebody, yeah,
She gave him all the stuff. She got her questions answered,
yeah.
but then gave him more bounty. What did she
Get in return? That's a good question, because the Bible doesn't really say that she gets anything other than answers to her questions, which, it doesn't seem like, okay, so first of all, let's step back for a couple of things. First of all, what would you say after hearing this story and just reading it as a blank slate, and not, that's why I didn't stop while we were reading. I didn't break up with any of the commentary or the legends, because the legends go back to the Midrash. I mean, don't get me wrong. The Midrash on this goes back thousands of years. There's legends that develop over this. This is huge, by the way, not because there's movies about it, but because there's people whose whole lives depend on this. But if you read this story, okay, Rosemary already said, it sounds like it's a story of a trade deal. But what else would you take away from this story? Like, if you didn't know anything about the story, what would you take away from it? Anybody? I mean, what would you think? Well, I mean, I'm just going to throw this out. I mean, this seems obvious, but I do want to throw this out. It seems that Queen of Sheba was a known person, because they talk about her like, we don't have to tell you who the Queen of Sheba is. She's pretty important. So I just want to say that right off the bat. This is not like, there doesn't seem to be any question that she's someone of importance.
She's also mentioned in the Quran too.
Well, she's mentioned in a lot of later sources. So even before the Quran, she's mentioned in Midrash, in Christian legend, in Ethiopian legend. I mean, some of this stuff goes back thousands of years. I mean, Islam only goes back 1400 years. Now, I will tell you, we're not quite sure that the Queen of Sheba's importance is where she's from, Sheba, that she in particular was a well-known person, or the title, the Queen of Sheba, was known, like the Pharaoh. Like, we don't ever get the Pharaoh's names. I mean, we just saw Bat Paro, Pharaoh's daughter, he married. We don't know which Pharaoh that is. We think maybe it's this Pharaoh or that. We don't know for sure. We very rarely in the Bible will get a Pharaoh's name. I mean, that's part of the problem. We don't know. It doesn't say in the Egyptian, in the story of Moses, who the Pharaoh is. We say it's Ramses, or we don't know. It's Seti, his father. We don't know. It doesn't say which Ramses. There's four. I mean, there's at least two Ramses, three Ramses. It could be during that time. We don't know. We don't know. We don't know the Queen of Sheba's name. Don't know her name. There's legends about her name. There's legends her name. Yeah, there's legends of what her name was. But we doesn't say what her name is. It seems as though it's a title. And maybe Sheba was ruled by queens. Like they always had a queen. Maybe that was just the thing. They were ruled by queens. And it happened. We don't know for sure where Sheba is. Now we think because there is Shiva has already been mentioned in the Bible. And again, it's Shin Bet Aleph. It's mentioned as an area, a territory that's in modern day Yemen or Saudi Arabia. Saba. It's very possible. It's also possible that it's in Africa. Right across the straits from I'll just show it real quick. Right across the straits from Yemen. Here's Yemen. Here's Yemen, and here's Africa. Here's Somalia. And Djibouti, and Eritrea, and Ethiopia. There's Somalia. In all these countries around the Horn of Africa. Look, look, look. That's 10 miles from here to here. That's a 10 mile. That's 10 miles. Well, that's like 5 miles from this little island. It's far, but it's not. It's a day by boat. It's closer than Catalina, folks. Right? It's not 26 miles. It's 10 miles. So there was a lot of trade back and forth between, a lot of movement back and forth between Yemen and Africa and Ethiopia. This is Ethiopia here. What? Look, if she's here in Yemen, having a port, here's her place. Let's say it's here in Yemen. This is Yemen. And here's the port here. It's important to get goods from here up to here and then out through here, right? Comes into Aqaba. You come in here to a lot. This is a lot, right? This is the place we just read about. His ships are here in a lot. Comes into a lot, and then it goes up through here and goes out through the rest of any of these ports, or by land up to the north, up to Damascus, so Israel's a major trading port if he builds up this port like it says he did, has ships, has control over it, has a force, has a fort, has a path, has a road that goes from here to here to here. Remember, that takes a couple of days to get your goods from here up to here. But now you're in the Fertile Crescent. Now from here, you can take it anywhere in the world. You can take it up here. You can take it up here. You can take it over here. You can take it over here. So if she's got spices, and that's what it says she has. It says that she has spices. She's got gold too. And gold is obviously the commerce. It says she's got precious stones. But what it says is, that she had more spices than anyone ever saw. Never again did such a vast quantity of spices arrive when Queen of Sheba. So they didn't see gold. We just heard they had 120 talents of gold that he got from Hiram. Yeah.
The spices were very unique.
Yeah, spices were very, very expensive. In some cases, the spices were worth more than the gold by weight, right? If you have some of these spices, they're worth more than the gold. Look, truffles. You can buy truffles that cost more than gold.
Saffron's costs more than gold now.
What?
I think saffron costs more than gold now.
Yeah, it does. You're right. So some of these spices are worth their weight in gold or worth more. So this is what's going on here. A trade deal. Now we like to think that there was this love relationship here too. By the way, it seems that Queen. Wait, somebody said something. No? Oh. It is interesting, by the way. And also you can see there's this almug wood, which we think is sandalwood, which is definitely from Africa. Folks, this is super important. Why? Because, well, first of all, it does seem that look what she says. Praise be the Lord your God who delighted in you and set you on the throne of Israel. It seems as though she recognizes God, to some extent, or at least, your God. But her prayer is very nice. It's because the Lord's everlasting love for Israel. I mean, that seems like she really loves what Solomon's doing, and it seems like God has chosen him. So people are taken aback by her prayer, which seems to be very, very traditional. Yeah. Why is this important? As I said, vitally important. Because the Ethiopian Jews believe that they're the descendants of Solomon and Sheba. They believe that this is very important for who they are. And by the way, in all fairness, it's not just the Ethiopian Jews who believe that. Ethiopian Christians believe that too. The average, everyday, ordinary Ethiopian that you would stop in I'd say a lot of them are cab drivers in some places, or restaurant, Ethiopian restaurant, or Ethiopian, any place you'd meet an Ethiopian in America. And we have a decent sized community here in LA, but there's a huge community in Washington, DC. There's a big community in Vegas. If you meet an Ethiopian or Eritrean who also believe that they're descendants of Sheba and Solomon, if you talk to them, they'll tell you that their ancestor is King Solomon. They believe that. They believe that when Sheba went back down, and it says she went back to Africa or went back to her place, that's what it says. She went back. She returned to her own land, that she also returned with a baby. Solomon's baby, named Menelik. What? He seemed to be okay with her going back pregnant. Yeah. So maybe he thought it's cool that my kid is there. Now, why is this also important? Because again, if Ethiopians believe that they're descendants of this union, they believe that they are part of the people of Israel. As I said, it's not just, it's what? Yeah, I was going to get to that, Mike. So it's okay. Yes, Cheryl, the blood work does not show that this is true, but that doesn't mean that that's not part of the national culture. King Haile Selassie, the last emperor of Ethiopia, 100% believed that he was a descendant of Solomon. Now, Ethiopia went through a Marxist communist revolution, and Haile Selassie was deposed, and there is no emperor of Ethiopia ever since. That was in the 60s. It got taken over, and then Ethiopia's had a lot of civil war since then, a lot of problems. But that doesn't mean that the average Ethiopian still doesn't believe that. And so if you talk to an Ethiopian, they will tell you they believe that they're descendants. They also, so why is that important? Because the followers of Haile Selassie believed that he was a descendant of David and Solomon, and also the Messiah. And so there were people, including, it seems like Haile Selassie himself, who believed he was the Messiah. Why was this important? Because in the 1960s, Ethiopia was one of the only African countries that was ruled by an emperor. And it was a very important part of Black consciousness that Ethiopia was ruled by an emperor. Again, he was deposed by his own people, communists who were supported by Russia, the Soviet Union at the time. But why is this important? Because the followers of that movement of Haile Selassie were called Rastafarian. And the Rastafarian movement that talks about the Lion of Judah is talking about the Ethiopians, and they believe by extension, all Africans are descendants of the Messiah. And so Bob Marley and all the people who followed he's the most famous, but all the followers of Rastafarian culture believe that Haile Selassie and the Ethiopians are the inheritors of the Messianic tradition, that they're the dynasty. The dynasty continued, they believed, all the way through Menelik, through Haile Selassie, that Haile Selassie could trace his ancestry all the way back to Menelik, which means all the way back to Solomon, which means all the way back to David, which means he's the Messiah. Now, they also were Christian. They were Christian. The Ethiopic church was a very old church. They became Christian a long time ago, but they also believed that they were, like Jesus, Jews. They also believed, as Mike said, that they were in possession of the ark.
Well, that would make sense though,
Why?
because when the temple was destroyed, that they would send it down.
That's not what they believe happened. You're right in the fact that it could have been sent there, which is what some people believe, some Jews believed, but they believed something actually different, the Ethiopians. They had a really interesting take on this, which is that when Sheba went back down and returned with her baby, she also returned with a copy of the ark. A copy, a exact replica of the ark. A copy of the dimensions in gold of the ark. Now here's where it gets a little funky. They believe that Sheba didn't take the copy, that she took the real one. And because she took the real one, it got saved. And so the real ark is still in Ethiopia. Because they don't want you. They don't want you to see it. There's a guard in front of there all the time. Nobody has taken, it's an axum in Ethiopia, and no one has, forced the issue. But yes, they believe that they're guarding 100%. They believe, and 24 hours a day, they have a guard there in front of their ark. Now, nobody goes in and sees it and checks it. No one's done carbon dating on it. Again, it's not been verified.
Anybody ever seen it?
Well, if
There's
it's the
guards
real
too.
ark, you wouldn't want to.
The guards do, but they have, yes, they haven't opened, they don't open it. They don't mess around with it. They treat it, they revere it. They believe it's the ark, but they believe it's the actual ark, not the copy. So this is all part of the legend of Solomon and Sheba, but it's really, really important for Ethiopians. This is not a joke. This is not a midrash. This is not a story for them. This is their belief, and it is the belief of Ethiopian Jews to this day. Now, the thing that's interesting is that the Ethiopian Jews, and there's over 100,000 of them that live in Israel today, they were persecuted by the Ethiopian church, by Christian Ethiopians, for being Jewish. The problem is we don't know. They believe that they're the possessors of the tradition that never went away. There's another theory, which is that they are Ethiopian Christians who stopped following Christianity and only followed Judaism.
Doesn't that not make them the Messianic?
They don't believe in Jesus. So are they Christians who decided we're just following the Torah? Now, before you dismiss this as something that doesn't seem likely, understand that it's very likely. It's happened in almost every Christian community in history where the church has lost its power to enforce doctrine. Doesn't mean it happens on a wide scale. I did not say that. But every place where Christianity existed, there were groups that shed that part of their tradition and were left with something that was close to Judaism. Ethiopian Judaism is very close to Judaism. It's not rabbinic Judaism. What? that's a tough question to ask, because there are a huge group, and I'm actually working with them now. I'm actually in contact with them, of about another perhaps million who claim that they're also descendants of these people. So these people that are in the area called Shoa in north of Addis Ababa are now claiming Jewish ancestry.
Closest it to Uganda. I'm
The,
thinking
the,
about like.
but the Uganda know that they became Jewish later. They know when they did it. They did it 100 years ago. They were Christians who became Jewish because they had a leader, a tribal leader, who said, we're going to be Jewish now. We don't know that that happened with Ethiopia. It could have 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago. The problem is, again, there's no DNA connection to the Ethiopian, to the Jewish people. There's no connection. Just the genetic markers aren't there. That being said, they believe that they're Jewish.
So it's just conversion, it's what? Just belief, not conversion.
Look, it's their practice, right? So they kept kosher, or a version of kashrut, not the rabbinic version of kashrut, right? But they kept kosher. They did circumcision. They did holidays. They didn't have Hanukkah.
Where did they get this from?
The Bible.
Okay.
They had the Bible. Were they like Karaites? In some ways, yeah. And there was a theory that the Karaites helped them and gave them guidance, but we don't know that for sure. But they did not follow the Midrash. They didn't follow the Talmud. They didn't have those stories. They didn't have those laws. That's not in their vocabulary. They also don't have Hanukkah, which isn't in the Bible. So they didn't have Hanukkah. So these things they were cut off from, they didn't have, they weren't exposed to it, whatever you want to say. When they went to Israel, after Israel was established, Israel recognized them as Jewish.
They did.
Yeah, because Israel will not rely on DNA evidence.
Especially back then.
No, they'll rely on their story. And they took their story and they did something else Israel did, which I think is interesting, is they looked at their story and their life of persecution and said, they're almost Jewish by virtue of the anti-Semitism that they suffered, because they did suffer anti-Semitism. The people who practiced Judaism in Ethiopia, and there started to be connections between Ethiopian Jews and Judaism as a whole in the 1800s. So as Europeans started traveling into, like Tarzan times, I want to say Tarzan times, that's kind of, but it's a horrible situation, but it really wasn't until the 1800s that you had Europeans that were coming into Sub-Saharan Africa and unfortunately enslaving a lot of these people, but also encountering them. And so those encounters between Jews, who would oftentimes be part of, trade and did business I know people who were raised in Africa, were born and raised in Uganda, or I had a woman that I unfortunately just had to do a funeral for. She was born in Congo. She was born in Congo 90 years ago because her dad did business down there. But when people started coming in contact with the Ethiopian community, they started supporting them. Western Jews said, hey, let's support these people. And look at these poor people they're being persecuted by their Christian neighbors. And they said, that's like us. And so there was an affinity with that. And I have a deep affinity with the Ethiopian Jews. I have my whole life. But my affinity to them is also because of their experiences of anti-Semitism. I will tell you, when they went to Israel, they were recognized as Jews. They were not always treated well, because there is some racism still, obviously. But for the most part, they've been given homes. They've been, integrated into society. It's probably going to take another generation or two for Ethiopians to be as fully integrated as some other groups are. But the big waves of Ethiopian immigration started in the 90s when the Soviet Union fell, because during the 60s and 70s and 80s, Jews could not leave Ethiopia because it was controlled by a communist dictatorship, the ones that got rid of Haile Selassie, who were allies of the Soviets and were also anti-Israel and
They couldn't leave, but they were not seen as slaves or imprisoned or anything of that nature.
weren't treated well, but nobody was treated well, Marcia, in Ethiopia. Ethiopia was a complete mess. You remember the We Are the World stuff and all that. Until the Soviet Union collapsed and the West could kind of help and integrate Ethiopia as more of a country. But look, Ethiopia has had a horrible civil war for the last couple of years. And it has a lot to do with ethnic groups there in Ethiopia that want to have independence. We just gave a Nobel Prize to the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, and then 2 years ago, he was killing his own people. It's more complicated than that, but the war, a Nobel Prize winner, somebody that we looked at as, and I'm not saying he's not a good person, but they had a civil war going on. It's coming, it's like petering out a little bit, but you had a group in the north, you know, the Tigrayan independence people that wanted Tigray to be separate. They're caught between Tigray and Ethiopia itself. So about 20 years ago, as you recall, Eritrea separated from Ethiopia and became a separate country. So now there's a separate country called Eritrea. The Tigrayans want to also separate and make another country called Tigray. The Ethiopia says, enough already. You can't keep cutting up our country. I don't want to give my opinion on what, I mean, I kind of did already. It's Ethiopia doesn't want to keep losing parts of their country, but you know, look, I don't live there, so I don't know what it's like to be Tigrayan, but there are people in Ethiopia who didn't want their country to be cut up anymore. Just like there's people in England and in UK that don't want to lose Scotland, you know, it's not so different in a way that people don't want their country to be cut up. Like, you know, San Bernardino is going to become independent. I think most people don't care, but San Bernardino, most of us are going, okay. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. If Karen Barnett is listening, she's from San Bernardino. She doesn't want to hear that. But anyways, this is a very important issue for Ethiopians today. Never ever tell an Ethiopian that this story is not true. And I'm just saying there's no verifiable evidence that men elect, at least there's no genetic evidence.
But could they be another sect of Jewish, like we have the Ashkenazis and Sephardi? Could they just be another? Could
they become a different sect?
Could they have been another sect?
No, well, only from the standpoint of their peoplehood. There is no evidence that they were ever genetically connected to the Jewish people. Now, again, the issue is that you can't have, if you're basic, I agree with you in the sense that, I mean, I don't agree with, I mean, I think it could be true that they're a sect of Judaism. We can recognize it as a sect of Judaism. The problem to some extent, by the way, folks, is that Ethiopian culture is being subsumed by Israeli culture. So there's not going to be as much of a recognizable Ethiopian form of Judaism. They have their own holiday once a year called Seged, which is their holiday. It is celebrated in Israel. It's recognized in Israel as a holiday. It's very much like kind of like it's an indigenous Ethiopian Jewish holiday, Seged. And so they have celebrations on Seged in Israel now to some extent. But it's, again, you know, they're a small community within Israel overall, and there's 100,000 of them, and there's 7 million Israelis. And again, some of their unique cultural stuff is being lost because they're becoming Israeli. So on one hand, Israel wants to assimilate them, and on the other hand, you want their culture to be preserved and their stories and the traditions to be. So it's a very tough thing, because on one hand, you know, there's this idea that unless you're assimilated into the culture, you're not going to have the same access to things, and you're not going to be as integrated. And then on the other hand, you lose all your special things if you get assimilated. So it's a very fine balance of how do you keep that, how do you keep those traditions? And what's very interesting is that in many ways, the Ethiopian Jewish community in Israel is very committed to their Judaism. They're very proud of their Jewish identity. Even more so, you can make the argument than some of the Russian Jews who came at the same time, who came because they just wanted to get out of Russia. So there's a lot of animosity between Russian Jews and Ethiopian Jews because, you know, the Ethiopians felt they kind of got it, the raw end of the deal, because they were looked down on because they were Black. There definitely some racism there, for sure. There also is the issue that lots of Israelis have Russian ancestry. I have Russian ancestry. Lots of Israelis have Russian ancestry. So those people are a little bit more similar to the people that are already living in Israel. But there are Ethiopian Jews that are taking a bigger role in the army. Taking a bigger role in the police force, in the economy. The new absorption, the minister in Israel for Aliyah is an Ethiopian Jewish woman, very accomplished member of the Knesset, is in charge of all Aliyah now. She's Ethiopian. So they're having a bigger role. And I was just, they have to go through conversion. That's an interesting question. They went through a ritual of coming home, if you will, which some people felt was embarrassing, and then other people felt was needed in order to make sure that they were going to be Jewish. Overall, I think Israel was the Israeli rabbinical court were, I think, were pretty good, but some people felt it was not, that it was not, they weren't treated as Russian Jews were. Here, I'll show you. They already were. So here is the, this is Penina Tamino-Shata. She was born in Gondar in Ethiopia. She came in Operation Moses. And you can see that she's the minister since 2020 of immigrant absorption. So she's in charge of every part of the government that brings in, like right now there's like 20,000 Jews, I think, coming in from Russia right now. She's in charge of that. So she's a part of what we call the Yesh Atid party, which is the party, the centrist party of Israel. So she's she's still part of that. Remember, Israel had another election in 2021, so she's been able to stay in power, and so she must be pretty well liked. She's part of now what's called the Blue and White Coalition, which is Yesh Atid plus some other parties, and so I think it's pretty cool that she's definitely one of the success stories of what's going on in Israel. So she's the first Ethiopian-born woman to enter the Knesset. Not the first Ethiopian-born person, but the first Ethiopian-born woman. So we hope that that'll continue to be part of Israel's story. And when you go to Israel, you'll meet some of the Ethiopian Jews there. Yeah, there she is. I don't know, but I'd like to have her come out and talk to us because I think she's got a great story. But we'll definitely be meeting some of the Ethiopian Jews who are there now. And I will say one last thing about the Ethiopian Jewish community. One of the last big arrivals from Ethiopia over the last 10 years have been the Ethiopian Jews we call the Falash Amura. These are people who were converted to Christianity over the last 100 years. They were Ethiopian Jews who were, they believe, forcibly converted to Christianity and then have reclaimed their Jewish tradition. There was some debate over whether they were going to be allowed in. They've been allowed in, but it was the last wave of Ethiopian Jews, where the Falash Mora. Will this other group that I'm working on now, will they become will they be accepted and brought in as Jews? I don't know. We'll see. There is an issue of, here, I'll just show you the Falasha Mora. By the way, Ethiopian Jews don't like to be called Falasha. That was what they were called for a long time, but Falasha is actually what they were called in Ethiopia. It's not a nice word. It's essentially, like calling someone trash. So they don't want to be called that anymore, and so they don't call them that. So they don't call them Falasha anymore. We call them Ethiopian Jews. So the Falash Mora were, you can see there are approximately 8,200 Falash Mora still in Ethiopia today. And so most of them were allowed to come in. And so, yeah. So you can see Phalashmora did not refer to themselves as members of Beta Israel originally, and so that's one of the reasons why. So here's what it says. Today, Phalashmora who move must undergo conversion on arrival, making it more difficult for them to be situated in Israeli society. So that is the last group of Ethiopian Jews to come in. Will this other group of look, there's a feeling that maybe there'll be some Ethiopian Jews who will stay in Ethiopia. So they're building some of them. This is what we've been working on. This is the group that I've been working on now. Working with now. These are people who. This is the Friends of Beta Israel of North Shoah. So this is the group that I'm working with right now, and this right now it's not necessarily to get them out, and so we're not making it an issue of Aliyah, but we're working through this organization primarily called Cultivate, which is helping the people with agriculture, and you can see right here. We're working on this training site in this place called Deborah Bahan, which is it's basically almost like a kibbutz, and that is the those are the people that are working there, so people can.
So back to Beth Sheba, she just was a woman who was.
Not Batsheva, just Queen of Sheba.
Queen of Sheba.
Uh-huh.
You know, it seems like I just looked it up a little bit, that she came from the east. She's got all kinds of, like Chinese in her stuff and things in her.
What?
I just looked up something on her.
What did it say? Batsheva was David's wife,
Yeah.
Solomon's mom. It's a different name.
Yeah, I knew that.
So what were you reading, Marcia, where it says that she's Chinese? I want to hear that.
And, it said, I'll have to find it, but
Look, we don't know where Sheba is, but
what land?
it probably was
what
not.
land is Sheba from? And it says Axum, Ethiopia.
Mhm.
It says better known as the Queen of Sheba. The Bible reports that she ruled a rich kingdom from here, according to local, and tells the legend. And then it says, when the Queen of Sheba heard, anyways, but from the east somewhere, right?
Well, from either Yemen or from Africa.
Right.
I would say more likely from Yemen, but the African legends have stuck.
Wikipedia thinks it's Yemen.
Okay. I think Wikipedia is actually usually a pretty good source, by the way. I know a lot of people trash Wikipedia, yeah. But I will tell you that it's most likely based on the other descriptions in the Bible that Sheba is in Yemen, and based on just the description of the spices. Look, they don't have gold deposits in Yemen, but they do in Africa, and they could have come in through Africa. It didn't say the gold was mined there. It actually said the gold was from Ophir originally, or one of the places where it can. Ophir could have been a different place than Sheba. I mean, it doesn't anywhere say that they're the same place. The Ophir was mentioned before. So did Yemen have gold too? Yeah, sure. Solomon had gold. There's no gold deposits in Israel. So the gold would have moved, let's say, from Africa up through the rest of the world. But as a spice place, Yemen and Saudi Arabia and that area was very important for the spice trade.
Yeah, it just I'll have to go back and find it all. But it just sounded like this woman, and they show her here being dark skinned, and
Yes.
You know, that, it sounds like she just went on a little adventure and brought all her bounty and.
I guess, but it seems like she's there. It seems like she's there in a trade delegation. And that is,
But then it goes into.
I think
That
the
is-
idea about trying to just use the land to get through
No.
makes a lot of
Rights
sense.
to the
Yeah.
root.
yeah. What? Yeah, to that route, to be able to get her spices through Israel. And it makes a lot of sense that, because that's what people do today. They make trade agreements and they say, look, we want to be able to trade with you and we want to be able to use, nowadays, it's done, things are done over the internet. So it's just a matter of having access to people's internets, services. But back in those days that you actually had to get the products through. So, all right, everybody, that is the Queen of Sheba. And I promise you Queen of Sheba, but it's not quite as romantic as you might have thought. But go watch a movie. I mean, I think that one of the last Queen of Sheba movies I think they had Vivica A. Fox played Queen of Sheba. I'm not positive, but there have been a lot of beautiful Queen of Shebas. There's definitely been a desire in recent years to have her be as dark as possible. I think maybe the ones from the 1950s and stuff, the Sheba lady was not like the 1920 silent movie. The 1920 silent movie, not a very dark Sheba. But in recent Shebas, like this is the 1920 silent Sheba. She's not very African. As you get into the more modern times, I'll show you the more modern Solomon and Shebas, then they get this is 1959. That's not it either. But when you get into the more modern ones, even this one, I mean, this is Yul Brynner and Gina Lollobrigida. I mean, that's not a very dark Sheba. But I think it was Vivica A. Fox. Yeah, there it is. There's Vivica A. Fox as Queen of Sheba. It's called King Solomon. There's Vivica A. Fox as Queen of Sheba. Now you're talking. Now you're talking. We're going to be much more diverse. We're going to have a diverse audience, or a diverse cast now. This is a Solomon, as you can see, played by Ben Cross, who was Harold Solomon in Chariots of Fire, but is not Jewish. But yes, this was a Solomon. It's not bad. It's not a bad one. He's a good actor. All right, folks. Stay safe, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Nothing. Bye. Thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.